Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm really excited about this topic and really excited to have this panel here to discuss all of this with you all. As she said, I am the research director for Zweig Group, and we've been around for about 30 years doing research, also advisory services, and education. And so, just to start with how this whole thing started, I would say it was probably about, a year ago. I got an email from Jamie Claire Kaiser, and she had this idea, and attached to it was an article that really shared her experiences, and I think all of you have a copy of that there as well. And I read this article that she wrote, and I was just totally floored. I was like, wow. I cannot believe how well she was able to kind of put her experiences together into this succinct piece, and I was really touched by it, and I also thought, I've had some of these same experiences too. So being the research director for Zweig Group, I immediately thought, okay, well, what can we do about it, and what do I need to do next? So I knew we had this large bank of data, so went back to the office and started kind of slicing and dicing things, taking a look at just some of the research we already had, dividing it up from a male and female perspective. And then from there, the rest of this has developed. Really one of the first stats that we looked at, and which is kind of the foundation for some of our discussion today, was when we looked at principals, so people who had reached, really a leadership position in the AEC industry. We saw that principals who were female, every single one of them said that at some point in time they had considered leaving the industry. That is a shocking statistic. And what we realized then was, just going down through the rest of the org chart, that so many other women also had either left the industry or were considering leaving the industry. And we wanted to know why, and then we wanted to know what can we do about it. So that's part of our discussion today. So to start with, we have Laura Roth here. She is the VP of Business Development for Hickok Coal here in DC, so she didn't have to come too far. We're very, very lucky to have her. We have Steve Lucy from JQ. He's managing principal there from Dallas. And we have Dana Burks from Tulsa, and she's with Crossland Construction. And she is the VP of Business Strategies. So just to start with, I think we'll just start with Jamie Claire Kaiser here. I just want to have each one of you really talk about, why you think this is important, why it's important to you personally, and why it's important for the industry as well.
So I actually had to write down my thoughts on this because I've talked about it so much, and you can kind of see exactly how it started in this article. So allow me to do something that people should never do when they're public speaking and read out loud to you. I really started, this idea developed for me because my career is focused on helping companies grow, thrive, flourish, and be successful, period. So we do that through a number of ways. We have different methodologies for helping companies get there, right? But I spend so much of my time thinking about how we make companies healthy. And I'm really concerned about the AEC industry's future if we don't land the best and the brightest minds. And I think we're really risking that right now. I think our data and my experience supports the idea that we're risking losing an entire gender that we don't need to lose. And to me, this is a preventable crisis, but we have to start talking about it. And we cannot assume that these conversations are happening in the upper echelons of the companies we work with. It's interesting to me, since I've had so many women reach out to me, and they're part of these smaller chapters of organizations. They're often discipline-specific or location-based, and they're talking there about what to do. So talking to people who already understand that there's a problem is not necessarily elevating this up to the C-suite. And that's really what I think that we can do at Zweig Group, because so much of our audience is the C-suite. I've had 2 female clients in 5.5 years. 2. It's just crazy. We've got to do something about it. But the problem is that I don't know that we've made the case at the top level. We're looking at statistics this morning, and here's a litany of things that will not surprise anybody in this room. This year, the year of our Lord, 2019, 90% of principals are Caucasian, 83% of them are men, and only 58% of them think there's a problem with a lack of diversity. So if barely over half of the majority of the senior leadership that comprises almost all of my client base even understands that there's a problem, we can keep talking about it in the smaller groups, getting together like we are right now, and all acknowledging something we already believe in, but we have to find a way to get it to the boardroom and get it into the C-suite. And that's really what my plan to help do with this movement is to focus on next. You know, how do we take this discussion up, but make it a discussion? It's got to be a conversation. We can't isolate people. We have to bring them in, but to me, this is a recruiting and retention issue, and we have to keep the best minds in this industry, and we can't talk about focusing so much on recruiting and retention and not talk about these statistics that women are feeling isolated.
Dana, do you want to go next?
Sure. Totally have experienced, my career spans over 30 years. And I haven't always been in construction, but I've primarily been in architecture, engineering, and construction. There certainly are, at least anecdotally, as well as some figures that I've looked up, there are still discrepancies between each of those disciplines as well. I like this study because it is across the board statement about our industry. But when you slice and dice it too, for example, in construction, you know, women make up almost half the workforce, and there's only 9% of women in construction as compared to, you know, 81% men. And it's rough. I mean, I could tell you story after story, but again, don't want to be divisive. That doesn't help. So it certainly does exist. It still exists. There's, I ask people, do we have programs? There's certainly diversity programs. I found for myself that working with groups of women, either formally or informally, outside and both inside the organization, have been helpful to create more of a power base that then can create awareness versus an individual facing it within their organizations. But everything you found, nothing surprised me. Unfortunately, it doesn't. We have a long way to go. I will say kudos to Zweig, because you're starting to make sure this discussion is happening, and that we keep that drumbeat up, and we keep it up in the articles, and we keep it up in the meetings we're in, and is really important.
For the record, I did not choose the center seat. They gave me the center seat. So I just want to say that up front. And also that I do have the #1 microphone. Didn't choose that either. Mine started, you asked, you know, why this is a topic to me. Mine started first at home. My daughters played sports through college, and I saw the inequities there, even though there's Title IX in place within that environment. And it was to the point that for her, it actually became her graduate degree was related to Title IX and NCAA compliance rules. And so she got very passionate about it, and we had some very long conversations about it, and it enlightened me to a lot of what was going on. And then from a work standpoint, we have an extremely bright woman, rising star within our company. And as she started to have her family, she challenged the partners in conversation, and she had the will to come out and have those conversations with us and challenge us to do better. We already recognized that we did not have the diversity of gender or ethnicity within our leadership within our firm, and she really started to lay out some very concrete paths based on her questions that we could start to have those discussions internally, and it created a much bigger platform to have it across the board, across all of our staff and things we could do. And so I'm very appreciative of the fact that she stepped up to have that kind of conversation with us, which has made it much easier across the board for us to have that across all of our offices and all our different leadership and departments within our company.
I mean, this topic is, of course, of interest as being part of the AEC industry for, I guess, about 10 or so years right now. But I think it's part of more of a macro climate that we're currently in right now. And that not only with regards to inclusiveness and gender roles and otherwise, but also in the way that our industry is changing. AEC is traditionally, in real estate, traditionally really slow to the game to adopt new technologies and new ways of working. And I think it's, similarly slow to adopt social change as well. So I think we're at the precipice of a really interesting time in the industry. And again, the numbers and the facts that we heard today certainly would indicate that we are lagging behind, similar to some other industries like tech and finance. But I'm interested to start coming up with some solutions that we can make. I mean, some of my counterparts up here have done some really interesting things with regards to tailoring approaches to accommodate both development goals when it comes to career paths that also align with personal and life choices. So yeah, I'm interested to have a conversation with you all, hear about your experiences, and start to be part of that change.
Well, just to start with, we do have some statistics here that are about the age and gender gap in the industry. And what we were able to see is that we definitely know that there's a shortage of young girls and, becoming even interested in the AEC industry to begin with. And that's definitely where the problem starts. But what we saw that was probably even more distressing is that it seems like, women are going through school, getting their degree, getting the job, and then rapidly exiting the AEC industry and not returning. And so I think that my first question and thing that I want to discuss with everybody here is, what are some of the reasons that this is occurring? So why are women leaving the industry and going on to either, work in other industries? So why are we losing them?
Well, I'll speak up a little bit. There is another study that AIA has been doing on this exact issue, because women are graduating at greater numbers than men are right now, which, by the way, until 1972, universities were allowed to discriminate based on gender and were keeping people from going to school. My husband's an architect, and he graduated in the 70s, and he said out of his whole class there was one woman. Well, it wasn't until 1972 they even allowed women in the architecture school. So, I mean, think about that. It takes a while to overcome some of these generational challenges. But AIA is looking at it as well. They do a pretty extensive worldwide study, and what they found is that because of the hours that are being commanded, around architecture it's the studio concept, and you are actually rewarded by working a bunch of hours. Now, whether you were effective or not, that's not what you're being judged on. It's like, so-and-so had to leave to go to their kid's recital. Well, I know personally back in the day that I would have been judged harshly. If my CEO said, I need you to be in this town tomorrow, I couldn't say, hey, I've got my kids in a play. You just said yes, and then scrambled and figured out how to make the arrangements that you needed to. So to me, it's a bigger, and in the AIA survey, they were finding that was the issue. Women wanted a better family life balance. A lot of times, every study shows they're heavily involved in the child caretaking in general, and that they can't do that and be successful, which points to the numbers in your survey, to move up, because you have to put in those hours. I do think generationally, we're going to see some improvements in that. I think the baby boomers, we need to get out of business, because that's what it really kind of is. Because I think these younger generations, and by the way, more than 50% of them, I think I saw a figure like that, were raised by a single mother. And so they're very used to women in a leadership and authority position. And they're also used to your point, coming up with these new society norms that are more accepting. I think that that is a big reason, though, why there's not flexibility in the workplace. We were talking a little bit about that. We both worked at companies where we need to start treating people like individuals and not a policy and procedures manual. And people are so afraid of getting sued, but they're going to get sued for the same reasons. So, if you give this person this, then you have to give this person that. We're an individual society. Sometimes people need more over here and some over here. So I just don't think we have a lot of flexibility in the workplace built in like that yet. It's certainly not systemic.
And I would just say, some of the the metrics that we use to evaluate people. To your point, what that looks like from an efficiency standpoint and how we're reevaluating that altogether. And I think some of that can come into these tailored approaches to not a one-size-fits-all policy as it comes to even gender-neutral policies. I know familial leave is important, or different responsibilities are important for both the mom and the dad. And again, I do think it's a generational shift for sure. But mapping out career goals and metrics that support them that aren't based on hours, which I recognize is very difficult for a service providing industry to grasp and to wrap their heads around. But I was mentioning yesterday in a similar conversation that we were having amongst ourselves about how I see women in the industry substantiating their purpose and their roles using these, quite frankly, archaic metrics around hours. Like, I've been working like so many hours, and I mean, I think there's talking again about kind of societal norms and the way that we talk about our lives and otherwise. There's some sort of pride in being busy all the time, as opposed to working better and smarter and not doing it all, but doing some of it well, as well as possible, and giving yourself that credit. And I've seen it more with my female colleagues and my male colleagues, feeling like they need to substantiate themselves, again, through saying how much they worked as opposed to what they did in this period of time and how they were able to get to their sport practice, or they have a side like maker business or something like that, something that really fulfills them. With regards to policies in place for companies, I think the tailored approach is the way to go. I think it will feed into culture as well, and everyone here, I think, is an ambassador for their firm's culture, and it would be a lot easier to sell and create if you had something like that in place.
And our data does show, when we asked, I think we did a survey of almost 1,400 employees across the whole industry, and that's all job roles, genders, everything. Universally, people are unhappy with things like maternity, paternity leave, family leave, and flex time. That were some of just the lowest ratings when we looked at everything. I mean, everything from, how happy are you with your IT support to whatever, at the bottom is still family leave and flex time. So that's something we're seeing, I think, especially when we look at the younger generations, among men and women. And I think we'll continue to discuss some of that today. There's another component, though, and I think it's more than just policies. It's mentoring and having leadership.
Yeah, that's right. And I wanted to bring this up too, because this is something that's impacted my career and me personally, but the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A sponsor will help you get to the next position in your career. They will speak for you and sell your ability, your effectiveness, and professionalism, and that will often be what you need to get to the next level. A mentor is how you don't burn out. That's who you talk to about what's going on. And I think that many people seek out mentors that have been through similar experiences, right? So if we don't have a representative proportion of women in leadership roles, who are the women going to go to for mentoring? And I've been really lucky. I've had many, many sponsors in my career. I've never had a mentor. And I just wonder if that's got to be a big part of the challenge that we have here. And there was some data that you'd sent to me from NCSEA. They did a study of structural engineers and the impact of mentoring. And the reason that this is important is that the respondents without a mentor are 20% more likely to consider leaving. I just want to tie those concepts together too, of like not having somebody to look up to and to go to for your professional development, and tying that to the desire to leave. Do you think that there's a connection there? And if so, what can we do about it when the reality is we don't have a bunch of women in leadership roles?
I think part of it, and since I'm a structural engineer, I definitely buy into that result. And as an industry, we are definitely gender skewed, gender and ethnicity skewed. And so I think the first step is you just have to decide that you want an open culture within your workplace. And so in our case, we eliminated all offices. Everybody's in an equal cubicle, open workspace. And what we found was that there's much more interaction, and there's much more likely to have someone who's 1 year out of school come and ask me a question than there was before, where everybody tried to stay away because they assumed they were supposed to be invited in, as opposed to just, I can enter. And if you establish the culture that someone can enter just because they decide that they don't have to ask permission to have those conversations, then it can take on a whole different dynamic within that. The other one that we've encouraged is for them to find mentors outside the company. Yeah. In my own case, I chose mentors outside the company because I had those opportunities. My peers did not. This was 30-something years ago. But I had opportunities to do that, and I decided to, and in many cases they're retired, but I still have conversations with them. And we've encouraged that, especially from an engineering side. Go find architectural clients that you have that you feel comfortable asking questions to. Go find somebody on the construction side. Establish your peer group, because there's safety in numbers. And feel where you're comfortable that you can ask those kind of questions. And then it can start to override what the policies are within a company. I think a lot of times we default to it has to be a policy decision to change the culture, and the culture has to change first, and then the policies will follow once the culture is in place. You can't mandate culture, but you can develop it, and that's something that I think we all need to strive to do better within our industry.
I'd like to add something on that. I've spoken at SMPS about this before. It really is not the mentor to come up and tap and say, I want to be your mentor. I mean, if it is important to you, you need to be very active in finding a mentor. And you spoke to multiple mentors. Me too. There were things I admired in people that were outside the company and some inside the company, and I would work with different people and ask them questions based on what I admired about them and what I saw that I wanted to be like that. But it wasn't anything that they're going to come, hey, I want to be your mentor. And I hear a lot of people stepping back. Don't step back, step forward. You have to be an advocate for yourself in mentorship. And SMPS is great because it gives you an opportunity to see a lot of different leaders. And so there's that. We have a pretty active mentorship inside my company, but ironically, that mentorship relates specifically to the trade of construction. And we have 1,600 employees, and a lot of them are not directly involved in field work. Those things are challenging. And we have very few women, but again, as I pointed out, there's hardly any women in construction. And we were talking yesterday about this program, and I found this point interesting. I think Stephen actually brought it up initially, which is we also owe it back to the industry to not say this is just happening to me, but to go out and make an active difference. I would challenge everybody here today to do that. But kind of the ways we have to do it is super early on, not after somebody's inside a culture and organization, but go out outreach to young people and make sure that they know that these things like STEM. And I watched Mean Girls for the first time this week. Has anybody seen that movie?
Everybody's seen that movie.
I had not. And I thought it was so funny. I was thinking about it in relation to this. Lindsay Lohan, so she's this character really good at math, right? You guys remember this? And then she pretended she didn't know math. She goes, I'm not good at that, and started failing to get a boy because she didn't think that it was an attractive thing as a woman to be good at math. So there's some self-fulfillment to that, and there's a lot of research, by the way, that says when we say, I mean, have any of you don't have to raise your hand, said, I'm just not good at math. Well, that's really, it's a fulfilling prophecy. So you've got to go think of it more positively and use positive words. So I hope you think about that and retrain your brain, because every time you say something deprecating, you're reinforcing that. But anyway, I know I'm digressing, and mentorship I think is critically important, and it's on your shoulders to find the right mentors.
I just think it becomes a lot harder. And yes, I totally agree with you, but I think that when we're talking about how do we keep women in the industry, specific to that discussion, women are less likely to have a mentor. The study also indicated women are less likely to have a mentor, and people without a mentor are more likely to leave. And I have a bit of a challenge pushing that back squarely on those women, saying, well, go out and find you one. You know,
I'll flip the conversation a little bit. Is we talk as if mentor-protege is a generational thing of younger to older, and we really need to flip the conversation. The C-suite needs to be the protege and go back to the younger generation and ask them to be our mentor. Because their viewpoint, and they're the future of our industry, their viewpoint is a whole lot different, and they're looking at it and asking questions differently, and we need to learn from them what we need to be asking, how we need to be asking it, and what the end result is that they want. Because we can sit here and guess all day long, and I can tell you, I'm going to guess wrong almost every single time. The best conversations I have are those conversations, and when I sit down with them and they tell me, or I ask them the questions, what can we do to make this better? And then it's them teaching me what we can do to make it better. And then it's for me to determine and help implement whatever that change is from a business standpoint. It still has to make business sense, but then you can make a business decision on what is the best approach for us to take as a company going forward.
That's great. That's great.
Well, Laura, I don't want to single you out, but you do work for a firm that has 60% women.
That's right.
So how do you think the culture is different there, and what's kind of gone into creating that kind of atmosphere that I think probably allows women to succeed?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, we talked earlier about, you know, these formal policies don't need to be in place in order for culture to flourish or just to be, for that matter. And there is nothing in place, I think. And we've talked to our leadership about, you know, instituting policy around more inclusive hiring practices. And they don't see the need because our numbers are already well representative and diverse in their heads. I guess my challenge to them is, once women are part of the firm, kind of what are we doing? It's not a static moment that now that we have 60% women, like we win. You know, we have to, I mean, we do. No, and it's a great number in the architecture and engineering industry, like, for sure. I mean, certainly we also have a design practice as well that helps to bolster those numbers. I'll be very transparent. But yet there needs to be, I think, you know, a process in place for when you're at a firm and how you're celebrating each and everybody's uniqueness. And I think there's actually a concurrent panel right now about celebrating strengths, which I'm sure is great, but don't leave yet. But I think we're morphing into a place where our leadership is, I mean, across the board, AEC Industry and otherwise, is recognizing that success comes, you know, with a diverse mindset and a diverse group around them, and whatever that looks like. I think they're finally recognizing that the world is, you know, becoming less and less homogenous, and they need to start embracing that if they haven't already. And I mean, I'm lucky enough to have leaders, you know, that seem to want to instill that kind of catered approach to each of their people.
So when we go to interviews and we're all homogenous on one side, and the clients are different, and people like to work with people they recognize and connect with, which is part of what's led to where we are, or what is causing where we are today. But I find that is actually a good sales tool. We're going to hit them in the pocketbook. Diversity makes good sense. I mean, there's not just sense, it's profitable. If you put a group of people, research shows time and time again, you've got a diverse group of people solving a problem versus a homogeneous, high IQ group, much higher than the other group, guess what? That diverse group comes up with more solutions and better solutions to the challenge. And companies that have women who are involved in leadership are more profitable than companies that don't. We just need to keep reminding people of that. It's good business sense when you're sitting at an interview table with a client and you've got 5 of the one gender and your clients across from you are diverse. I know, I mean, you had mentioned something. What was it happened?
Well, I mean, we're finding more and more in the RFP process earlier. And actually, if anyone was a part of the recruiting and retention panel or participated in it yesterday, this came up. And I work in business development, so clients are paramount. And I know we have business development people and marketers in the room. And more, we've been talking about the RFP process and what that looks like and what our clients are asking for. And a lot of times they're asking for the makeup of your firm. What do you do? How do you celebrate your culture? How diverse are you? What are your hiring practices? And we have come to interviews and we want to be representative of our firm and who's actually going to be working on the project, and we make a very concerted effort to make sure that we're addressing the client's needs. So the more and more the clients are beginning to focus on this, I think that is what's really going to hit home in leaders at firms that may be a little bit more on the traditional side of the house. I think it'll have to hit them in the pocketbook, quite frankly, to get things to start moving forward in that kind of official way.
And we had a recent case just 2 weeks ago, actually, where the client at the end of the meeting told everybody that he expected the design team, and this is a project that's under design, that the design team should be more representative of their client at the next meeting, because it was all white male sitting across the table from them. And they made a specific point that wasn't going to happen again.
And A lot of the like public RFPs already, they parse out exactly how many minority women-owned businesses should be, small businesses should participate in the public RFP process. I think if you live in the DC area, you certainly know that, and I think it's a formalized way to address that matter, but I think we can all do again.
And multiple now large corporations are adopting the exact same procedure.
So I want to kind of go back to, and hopefully, you all will have questions that you want to bring to us or points you want to respond to in this discussion. But I want to go back to the first statistic that I cited, that 58% of male principals don't think that there's a problem with the lack of diversity.
It's working
It wasn't
for me.
I'm on the 42% side.
That really surprised me this year. I mean, it's everywhere, right? Like, I feel like every other industry has already figured this out. Like, we are, almost proudly, indignantly ignorant.
That's true.
You.
Yeah. I got to own it, I guess. Yeah.
But that really, really surprised me, because I feel like there are more conversations happening around this topic, but they're clearly not happening at the right level of the organization. How do we get this conversation to start? We've failed on all efforts so far with 58% of the male principals. I don't have an answer, so.
I think one of them is just starting to have the conversation. It's just settings like this. Before, it's been a conversation that's back of house. There's also, and some of this is a generational change. If I look back to when I first started my career, there was no peer-to-peer conversations even taking place. You built a fence around your firm. Everybody else was the devil that you were trying to purge from the world. And now there's a lot more conversation between firms. There's a lot more sharing of data. There's a lot more sharing of policies, which is helped, but it needs to even become more public about what we're trying to do. That we do look at it as an industry, and we don't look at it as a conglomerate of small firms all trying to carve their little piece of the world out, and understand that we all impact each other. And that it's not just engineers versus architects versus contractors. We also are in a very adversarial industry between shared expertise, and we don't want to step on each other's toes, and we need to stop doing that also, and understand that it's for the betterment of all of us that we have these conversations. Easy for me to say. I don't know the answer as to how that to take place, but it's easy enough to say.
And let's not go work at companies that don't do it. It's a talent issue too. I was thinking about this, and I own accountability for things and times and decisions made related to this. That, what do you say? We're going to vote where we're going to spend our money where they're doing the right thing. And to your point about the client saying that, well, talent is such a huge issue, and maybe we make a promise to each of us ourselves who are experiencing it to say, by the way, I'm going to come work for you, is that I want to go work at places that celebrate diversity. That's a huge part of who I am and what I'm about. So what questions do I need to ask, and how transparent is their pay scale and compensation, and how willing are they to share that information with me? And I have a friend who said, why are you always surprised that people are being sexist when you're in a sexist, industry, honestly? So it's true, but you have choices that you can make, and how you vote and spend your time. And people want your talent. Really talented people have opportunities to go lots of different places. They're going to go, and those companies are going to win the talent war. And there's shortages, but if people who are talented say, I'm not going to go work for you because they're old school and you don't have enough diversity, that's not kind of the place and environment I want to work, thank you very much, then that will help, I think, kind of motivate employers to see that they better do something.
Mm-hmm. And it has to be more than a marketing pitch, right? It has to be more than we have a program. And there's one of the examples in this article. Somebody who he asked me to contact him when I came to town, so I did, and then he said it would be inappropriate to meet up after hours. I was like, okay. I saw not too long ago, they have this huge Women in the Industry initiative at their company now. And I am so tempted to be like, okay, well, during core hours, of course. It's a marketing tagline for this company, because I've experienced it That's not how, they are not trying to give women a seat at the table. And we've got to be careful with that. When 58% of the male principals don't think it's a problem, coming out with like these diversity and inclusion initiatives, they're not genuine, or that's my fear. And then we're going to do more harm than help. I don't know if you guys have any solutions to these problems. Yeah.
I've done some research on this topic, co-authored a paper a couple years ago, and I've also been on some panels in Connecticut with the Department of Labor and focus groups. And the one thing that I think happens is that women aren't vocal either about where they want to be. So as far as what, that they want to move up, that they want a seat at the table, and men are. And I think that's an issue. So I do try to mentor folks coming up, especially women coming up, that you really need to be vocal when it comes to raises, when it comes to promotions, because the men are doing it. And I just had a conversation with a principal of a firm, and they're having some promotions, and I'll just say John is getting promoted, and I said, well, what about Jane? And he goes, we had some discussions, and there was actual, questioning back and forth whether or not Jane was going to get promoted. And I said, well, that's ridiculous because Jane is just better than John. And he goes, but John was more vocal, and Jane's never mentioned it.
Very good.
And this was just 2 weeks ago, and I'm just like, Jesus. And then I'm like, you guys have to get your head out of your ass. And
That's
like,
one
look
solution.
around you. And, he's like, well, it's not me. It's, the decision of, all these, white males. And again, it's just, it drives home the point to me that women, like I've always throughout my career, as, scared sometimes, especially when I was younger, to have those conversations. Men are doing it, and women just need to be better skilled at doing that. I know when I get some blowback sometimes, like people are like, well, that's not fair, but that's reality. And so I think we just need to be better at that. A good book was by Mika Brzezinski, Know Your Value, and she had a chapter about that. And I did a mentoring program in Connecticut for SMPS, and I gave everyone a copy of that book, and I said, please read it.
Nice.
So that's just one maybe anecdote.
Interesting to your point, thank you, is that there have been research studies done, and this is male and female. Judge a leader, a woman leader, who used the same traits that they find identifies a male leader as attractive: decisiveness, aggressiveness, those types of things, but they are judged more negatively for having those traits. They're not female traits, is what it's considered, and both female and males judge them more harshly as a poor leader. Whereas the male who exhibits that, they actually get more confidence in them as a leader. So those are things that we ought to ask ourselves as women to other women, and am I really looking at this in the right way or thinking about that in the right way? But you're right, I think we're brought up to be nice girls and get along with everybody. And by the way, that's the best leadership trait ever, collaboration. But is it valued, I think that's a good point.
I work for a woman-owned engineering firm. We also have a female president and a female CFO. And about 18 months ago, we made a very informed decision that in order to encourage women to come into this industry, we needed to start working in the schools. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we now have partnered with several Arlington County, Fairfax County, Loudoun County schools, and girls' clubs of sorts, whether it be Girl Scouts or bullying girls. But I have a team of 7 young female engineers with 12 years or less experience that go out each Friday and meet with different girls. So it's done 2 things. It's empowered the engineers. They look forward to Fridays. They do different activities with the girls, but they talk about STEM, they talk about math. Last week we did CCTV of sewers, which was quite interesting. They go home with business cards from the engineers We've had several jobs actually come from that because the girls went home and said, hey, I met a real lady engineer today. And so the parents are now involved. It's been really great branding for our firm. And then as a result, we're seeing that as these girls start at 3rd grade and go up through junior year in high school, so we're seeing a lot of them going into the engineering and the sciences at the university level. So it's really rewarding for us as a firm.
That is so fantastic, and that's really sort of where I kind of started with this, is we've got to get people, that we want the best and brightest minds, because we're competing with STEM, we're competing with going into medicine, we're competing with Facebook, we're competing with Tesla. I want the geniuses that are running those companies in AEC, and we can't get them there if they're not fascinated by it early on, and we can't isolate an entire gender and then expect to get the best and brightest.
Well, Chad and I were at a recent American Society of Civil Engineers Education Summit, and it was all the department heads of all the civil engineering programs in the nation, and they all met in Dallas. And other than he was representing the University of Arkansas, and I was there for Texas A&M, there was no difference between us. But it was interesting that one of the comments came back about, one of the speakers says, well, from academia, this is what we need, and there was strong pushback from at least one of the deans on, well, you have to pay more and you have to do more in order to allow us to be able to keep the people that are in our program that actually want to go to work for you afterwards. And so there's this disconnect between academia and the workplace of what they expect in academia as a student and what they're going to get handed off to. And there's this arm's length transaction that takes place as opposed to the integration that we're all in this together and we got to start early. So I applaud what you're doing. And there are programs out there like ACE Mentoring that works nationally. Our firms are very heavily involved in that. There's programs you can do such as establishing scholarships that are specific to gender and ethnicity, although I will tell you that legally that is starting to get pulled off the table. We tried to do that and we're not allowed to do that for legal reasons. From the university would not accept it with those parameters on there. But there's definitely things that we can do as an industry that will take people at the high school level or at the junior high level and nurture them up through the process. But when they get there, we have to have the environment that's welcoming to them, that they don't go somewhere else. And right now we don't have that fully in place.
My question's for Steve. Steve, you seem really passionate about this issue, and you said that you're actually not one of the 58% of men who think that there's not an issue with this, which is wonderful, but according to your website, your firm's leadership team and executives is 100% men. You don't have any female leaders.
No,
so how do you reconcile what you're telling us today with that information, and what's your firm doing to change that?
No, I meant to get in front of that question, but I did not. Because I fully expected that, and when I see all these phones come up, I go, oh crap, this is about to happen. Actually, I said the Zweig one, we get shit done. So it is, yeah. So we recognized it several years ago, and we started making purposeful hires at the entry-level position. We've tried to make hires at senior levels, and we face the same problem that our industry has as a whole. It's a limited number. So what we've tried to also be very cognizant and prevent is hiring strictly for the purpose of gender or diversity. There has to be a qualifications base still to that they're the right person for the job. But then we do broaden out how we evaluate to include multiple tiers, and so it's not seen as a partner-only decision in how we do hires and how we bring in hires. So if we hire a new entry-level position or a mid-level position, the decision to hire that person is all coming from their peer group.
Oh, goodness.
It does not come from a senior position that makes that recommendation for the hire. And so that establishes, at least from our viewpoint, a comfort level that person has with what their peer group is experiencing of interfacing with upper management and interfacing with everybody in the company, and not some story that we're just trying to tell that makes it sound like we're doing good. Do we need to do better? Absolutely. JQ Engineering needs to do better. And we're working hard to do that, and we have some that are just at the verge. They'll make the principal level and partner level. here within the next year or so.
And that there's a reason that obviously we could have brought anybody onto this panel in the entire universe. And the reason that we wanted Steve's perspective specifically is because I think that what he's trying to do is going to change the future of the company 20 years from now. Most CEOs, if they're confronted with a lack of diversity, will make a key hire at the top. And then check it off the list, I'm done, right? But going out and spending time with the students and trying to build up that next generation so that this is a company that reflects the communities that we're serving is a really long-term project, right? And it takes a dedicated effort. So not being there yet is not a failure to me. It's being ignorant of the problem, right? And that's why I wanted his perspective on this panel.
Well, and I like that you've mentioned the cultural thing, and that's the big thing. You can't push things into a system. You have to change your whole culture, and that's a very significant effort, and that's a whole different deal, and it just is part of the fiber of the company. And so it does have to come from leadership to understand that and believe it, not just say it and just, okay, we put it in a procedure, we're going to have a percentage of this much or this much. It has to be something deeper than that.
Hello. Okay, I was like, is this thing on? Hi, I'm Danielle. When I started AEC, there was no one like me. From a female point of view, from an ethnicity point of view, sexual orientation point of view, like there was no one that I could say, oh yeah, you look like me. My suggestion, and because I'm a marketing nerd, the thing is that when I see now, when you look at Netflix or you look at, different shows, it's so, now I'm like, wow, I wish I would have saw that when I was a little girl, to see this black woman that's a superhero. And by doing that, I can see myself in it. So maybe we do, almost do a marketing campaign to really work hard to create, wow, once you see it and I believe that I can be in that position, I think that's the thing. And I think that's that's my purpose. I feel like that's part of what I'm doing, why I even stuck with AEC, because I definitely did. I was like, I don't belong here. People did not make me feel welcome. And that's probably why I don't necessarily work in it now, but I'm still close to I'm still in the industry. So I think if there's a way for us to create some marketing plan to where I can see, I see women in these positions, I think that would be, as a whole, if we have any control over it, maybe that's what we can do as an idea.
Absolutely.
Great. I think Marion had a
Thank you. That's definitely a very good, effective potential, solution and step.
So I worked for a firm that believed in diversity, and it actually came from the top. They asked me and the other two female VPs to start a Women in Leadership program within the firm. And it turned it into a bit of a marketing piece because we invited people from other firms, competitors, project teammates, invited them into our office. We invited a speaker to come and talk to us about how to talk to men, because we are nice, and how to talk in terms that they understand. The main purpose was to let the women in the firm know that they understood and are trying to improve things, but it also raised awareness with the men, because the leaders got it, and we had female leadership in the C-suite, but we did not have female principals on the architecture side. So, and that was being held back by the males that were in those roles. So making it more visible within the firm, and we did this once a quarter, we had these programs, and it just grew and grew and grew. Once it finally got to a point where it was really, they'd gotten the idea, the guys got it, they turned it into more of an inclusive program. It's not just about women in leadership anymore, it's about inclusion. And it's still going today, and they've got female partners now, and they've done a really good job, and they continue. It's intentional, that's the thing, it's intentional.
That's awesome.
We mentioned the ACE Mentor Program. I've been president of Connecticut. It's the second chapter. There's about 70 chapters across the country. So for the past 20 years, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. I could just say that it works because there's students now that we mentored in high school who are now that are now employed in the industry, and it's males, females, minorities, who are now mentoring the future generation. So it's coming full circle, and it works. So if anyone has any questions, acementor.org, but you can come see me too.
Nice.
I just have a question, and I know that we all probably have stories that we could spend a week talking about, but I work for a pretty open, liberal firm, or they think they are. And, but, I came from the finance industry originally, and although, I had been able to break these barriers, I was the youngest person that had ever had my title and was top 5% nation, but I got interviewed 4 times for my position now, and I actually heard on my first day, I walked in and they're like, wow, I can see why you hired her. And I was like, that sucks. And so I mentioned it to my boss once. I was like, that's kind of what people are talking about. And he was like, oh my God, yeah, we interviewed you 4 times because we knew everyone was gonna say that. And it was like, you don't even see like that, it's so intrinsic, that like, so inherent. How do you, unfortunately, I am considering leaving the AEC industry just because, why? Elevate her, elevate me, I'm her. Like, I want to go work for a company that knows how awesome I am. Like, and so I guess I want to be that role model for tomorrow's generation, but how do you not get burnt out? Especially, I'm at a boutique firm too, so how do you not get burnt out from it all?
Well, and I think that was really, that's sort of the breaking point that I felt like I was getting to, and that's when I find myself crying on an airplane. I think we can all agree that's a breaking point, like, not a high moment. But I just had let this stuff weigh on me for so long and never talked about it. My CEO sitting here, I'd never mentioned any of this. Maybe. I don't think I've ever had a conversation about all of these things that happen that aren't a big deal until I'm just done, And that's really what I want to help build, a community of people who are just done. And that's why we actually put this on Facebook first. We really there's a Facebook group associated with this, and this was Christy's idea because she's like a genius. But the idea of having it on Facebook is because you're people on Facebook, right? Your pictures are, you in your casual clothes hanging out with your kids. Like, that's a human. We're trying to connect with humans. What are the things that are weighing down humans? And then we can talk about whatever discipline you're in, whatever, state you're in, and divide up based on all of the things that we divide ourselves up on, right? But if you've got something that you're not sure if this is okay, or how do I confront this, I wanted to create a chat, like a community where you can find resources that are out there without it being like a formal thing, right? If people are interested, go there and talk about it. I don't know of another way to actually engage and to get people to come out of their shells and share their stories. So, again, I'm looking forward to ideas.
I love that you stood up for yourself. I think that is the biggest thing, is speak up, say something. Just anecdotally, and I wasn't involved in this particular meeting, but just from the sidelines, somebody said, that architect is a woman and she's ugly as a dog. And another person in the room who's great, she stood up and she goes, why are you commenting on her looks? What does that have to do with her performance or anything? And this person was at a marketing coordinator level, and she was speaking to somebody who was running a profit center. And I would like to say that changed the way he talks. I don't know that it really how much influence, but I was so proud of her and made sure she knew it, because those are hard conversations to have. You feel like maybe I'm going to lose my job. But I think pointing it out, now whether they assimilate it or not, I think somewhere we're going to touch them. If everybody starts pointing out, hey, wait a minute, you don't have to make them embarrassed or whatever, just go, you know what, that doesn't feel right. Like if I said that about you, and characterized you in that way, how would it make you feel? That we can start educating people that that's not okay. I think when we don't speak up, we're saying it's okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Frisbee. I'm with the Associated General Contractors of Massachusetts. We're a trade association that supports commercial construction. So a couple of things. I think to your point about if you had only known about what was the opportunities that were available. So I think as an industry, we don't do the best job at representing who we are. Mm-hmm. We are a STEM industry. We are cutting edge. Yes. We are diverse. We're not there 100%, but we certainly are working towards that. And I think we're all starting to recognize, certainly in Boston, the support that women need in the industry. So recently, well, a few years back, we launched a Women in Construction Committee. And it's a platform, it's not a bitch session. It's a platform for women to get together to discuss, you know, what do I need so I can stay in the industry? What are the challenges that I'm facing? Because there are some issues still. There are a lot of issues still. And a lot of women need support, whether it's networking, whether it's a specific educational programming we provide for these women. And then again, it's visibility. I think it's getting the word out that, you know, young, older women, they're smart, they're professional, getting the word out to the girls in the schools. We recently launched an awards program for women in construction. So each year we have 4, awards that go out. And again, it provides that visibility where, we're supporting women, we're, celebrating women in the industry. And I think we need to do more of that on a whole. But again, it's that misperception, and it's that visibility. We need to do a better job of representing who we are, who we want to be.
I think one of the things that's interesting is if you look at some of the statistics that's here is a lot of the topics that people think are topics are really gender neutral topics, like work-life balance, parental leave policies, paid time off, And so if you look at a lot of what we think are barriers to this equity, it's really a barrier to anybody wanting to stay within our industry. And then if you break those down and you look at them from a purely business standpoint, which we did related to our parental leave when we got asked about it, it actually made business sense for us to implement that policy based on what we saw as cost and cost risk of people not staying or leaving from our office. And what is that replacement cost? Was that loss of knowledge? And it was a simple economic decision at that point. I mean, it was the right decision to make, but it was the right decision for everybody that we made. It wasn't a gender-only decision that we made, because we've had just as many men take advantage of that as we have had women take advantage of that. And so a lot of times I'm really disappointed when the conversation evolves down into a policy decision. What are we doing from a policy decision? This is an atmosphere and culture decision of our industry from my viewpoint. And we have to make it more welcoming and all-inclusive into there. And we do need to celebrate it all. You talked about the celebration, how do you celebrate our industry? We tend to not. We tend to celebrate our clients a lot of time. We don't tend to celebrate ourselves and what we do well.
I do want to just backtrack for one quick second, just because we are almost running out of time. Going back to what you said, Dana, what do you do if you see something that is inappropriate? Like, what's the best way? So it doesn't matter. I mean, when you're a leader, it's a little bit easier to call somebody out or be like, hey, man, maybe that wasn't a great thing to say, or, this situation is, isn't the best. What do you do if you're somebody who's sitting in the audience and, maybe you aren't in a leadership role yet?
Well, as a leader, and I've heard things, I feel very much that I'm responsible to make sure that it is an inclusive environment, but also it's a legal issue. There's litigation impacts which are going to be costly, and aren't we as employees supposed to advise our employers? And I look at it from that perspective. So when I've heard things anecdotally, I've encouraged, because I wasn't there firsthand, I say, I really want you to reach out to HR and communicate this. We do have an ethics hotline as well that's anonymous. That's an easy thing for any company to employ. But when you look at it from a potential of, oh my gosh, if we got sued, it would cost us a lot. And so I think it kind of takes the discussion out of, I'm going to make them feel uncomfortable, I might get fired, I feel at risk to be conflict adverse is what I want to be. I think stepping up and doing it from that perspective of, hey, I just don't want us to get sued. I think it's really important. And they start thinking about it, yeah, that's an issue.
I was going to talk about something completely different.
Go ahead.
To that point, I would say taking something in the moment as you're comfortable and as is appropriate, addressing it and saying that it's not okay in that moment, and then taking it to whatever HR levels or whatever hotline, which is awesome that you all have established. I was going to talk to, I think, the last woman who spoke, and just a general question for the audience about industry organizations and otherwise that are pretty inclusive to women, and how you think, because I'm very cognizant of being part of some of those organizations, and sometimes the conversation can get to the point of putting genders in like opposing roles and making it, you know, it's not productive. Sometimes it gets into kind of like a session, which is fair because people are bringing their experiences to the table, and it's not to diminish that at all, but it's almost like a preaching to the choir. So what are we doing as part of those organizations that are for women in the industry, that are providing a safe place for people to talk about things that where they're comfortable, but that we're not excluding an entire gender, 58% of them which don't think there is an issue, perhaps because they're not hearing these conversations. So how do we get that going? How do we get those conversations
And
out there?
welcome them to
And
the
right,
conversation,
and welcome
right?
them,
We don't
right.
want that in statistics.
Right,
So
and yeah, and I mean, again, I think we're not at that point where we don't need organizations that are specific to promoting women and their development in the industry. Unfortunately, not there yet. But what are we doing to not exclude an entire,
yeah,
you know, gender from that role?
I
Because
think we have a
there
question.
certainly can't be a commercial real estate men organization.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I wanted to talk about, and I think that's where we need to go with this as an industry, is really the opportunity on the professional organization side and as well within firms. So on the professional organization side, I wanted to share, and maybe some of you are aware of this as well, there's an organization called CREW, Commercial Real Estate Women, and there's a great program within that organization that's been going on, and I don't know how many years, but it's been going on for quite some time, that is specifically for girls. So it's a program where there's a committee that puts together speakers that go into a school and do a day-long program for girls to help them understand the opportunities in the AEC industry for careers. So engineering, construction, legal, all of those. And I got to participate in that one time, and it's wonderful because you see these girls that are like, I had no idea I could do that. So, and then we kind of workshopped it with them. And then on the other side, I'm fortunate to be one of 4 leaders for our Texas region, the only female in that leadership group, but I'm grateful for that opportunity. And so we are responsible for creating mentorship programs within our firm. One of the things that we've started doing is creating a panel to talk about. So we had an all-women's panel, diverse experience levels, disciplines within the firm, and we kind of brought it up at a lunch and learn. So we talked about, you know, what are our individual experiences in our career journey and how that evolved along the way. Opened up our office for a conversation about that. Then we created a men's panel, which was fascinating. So we're all talking about like what are our individual experiences, and it's all of us coming together for that. And then we have another one coming up that's a mix of the two. So we're kind of, and you know, it's our responsibility to create an environment and a culture for those conversations to be ongoing, and it takes discipline. I mean, it's extra work, you know, creating a mentorship program and moving that along and guiding, you know, in different ways along the way. So, but maybe there's something that we can talk about SMPS and partnering with other organizations to come together and create opportunities for these conversations to continue.
That's really the challenge I think that's what we're trying to help with, because I know that these conversations are happening, and they're all so individual, you know, to why is a woman in, you know, structural engineering different from civil? We're talking about gender, right? Or still, I think they're the same in either one, and yeah, we've got to have bigger conversations.
I think there's a question down front that I've been trying to get in for a
Okay.
while. Sorry, I've seen your hand up a lot. Or comment.
Thank you. And I think there's one small thing we're missing here, and I liked I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
It's Laura.
Lauren. I should know that. I have a daughter named Lauren. So it's great that we're educating our young girls, but why is it just educating our young girls? Educate our young boys to understand that this is where our young girls are going to be, and this is the world they're going to grow up in. We are creating some divisiveness already by singling the girls out into programs that the boys don't get to go to. So I'll give you an anecdote. One of the firms that I work for, 160-person firm, led by a women architect, and several women on their partners, our partners in the firm. The firm is almost half women, I think, and it was never intended to be that way. It was started by 5 white males. So the interesting thing is the woman who's president was asked to get involved in they're very heavy in the home building industry, so she was asked to get involved in the professional the committee for women's, and so she's helped create several conferences for that. She opens up, anyone in the firm can go to this women's conference, and she now has several of the young male architects attending the professional women in building conference. So just also encourage your young male leaders to be part of this discussion, and maybe we can close that gap a little bit.
That's great.
I have one question in the back, and then we may have time for just one more.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Cook. I'm marketing manager with Wensley Architecture, Vancouver, Canada. My question is, we've got a lot of great information that we can take back with us, statistics, articles, but if we are, junior, mid-level in our firms, how do we bring this information back and start that conversation to get it started in-house?
Hit the forward button on that email and send it to your leadership team and ask them if they would be interested in talking to you about it. Make it a conversation. Throw me under the bus. That's easy. But really, I mean, this was interesting to me. I would love to talk about this with you. That's a conversation. That's an invitation. It's not a confrontation. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really, that's what we've got to do. We've just got to start talking about it. And I don't know where it will go in your company, but that would be my advice. Share something you would like their perspective on, and talk to them about it.
And offer to do some extra work after you have that discussion to make whatever initiative go. You've got some skin in the game on that, but I think that's an excellent suggestion.
This is a great conversation. Thank you for having this. There's a lot of great ideas about education and strategies. One of the things that I would love to hear from, so I started in this industry at a woman-owned firm. Our president was a woman, my boss was a woman. We had female scientists and planners. I was 20. I didn't realize how unique and special it was, and so it was in so many ways such a great firm, and I learned. I had an office with my boss. We had a shared office, and I was like, at first I was like, oh, this is awful. I wanted my own place. I learned so much from her about how she dealt with really challenging situations. It was like the best learning experience for me as a young woman. And it was so great. I feel like, I think it's a conversation that we should continue as an organization, but also what has been so valuable to me and continues to be valuable are people that demonstrate how to handle challenging situations. Like when someone says something really inappropriate, how do you deal with a colleague in a way that is, not apologetic, but also like, shh, cool, dude, not cool, right? Like because there are various levels. It doesn't have to, be an HR issue. Yeah. It can be you having confidence as a woman to be like, yeah, no, we don't do that anymore, right? Like that's over. In a way that, you're all, or I've had colleagues share with me, like, I don't find, I don't, that wasn't, you said something and it was, I'm old, I'm 50, right? So what I said in grade school, is no longer cool. And I was like, you know what, you're right, and I apologize. There are ways to have those conversations. Yeah, without it. And it might be a great just topic about, I love the stories. Tell me all about your challenging situations, how you became a partner, how we work together to continue to elevate ourselves, right? I want to learn how to be that diplomat, that leader, and help us all move forward. I think this is a great topic. Thank you for having it.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's a good question to end on. I do wish that we could, have another 30 minutes to continue to discuss all of this. But you want to wrap it up just a little bit about kind of what our next steps are?
Yeah, we actually have no idea what to do either. Again, and this is why we started with a Facebook page of let's just talk about what we want to do, right? So if you want to help with this discussion across organizations and across locations and across all of the things that we'll divide ourselves up on, start talking. Do this in your company. If you want to be part of this, you know, come to us on Facebook, join the conversation, chat on the topics that you care about. We also have on our website, Zweig Group has an ElevateHer page. If you have a story that you would like to share, send it to us. I would love to hear more perspectives on how people want to help with this issue. So send us your thoughts.
Yeah, and I just want to say that really this is just the beginning. I'm so excited we got to have this discussion here today, and I can see that there's so many people I didn't get to, and I really apologize, that I couldn't hear from everybody, but I hope that we will continue to hear from all of you and keep coming up with new solutions and be able to move forward. Hopefully start hearing some success stories and solutions to all of the different issues we discussed as well.
And thank you all so much to our panelists for being here.
Thank you so much.